Sitaram, Namaskar, good morning, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to all our listeners, brothers and sisters in Trinidad and Tobago, worldwide, up the Caribbean, and all of those who are listening and following us on the various platforms, Facebook and YouTube. And let me again thank you all for joining me this morning on our regular program of alcoholism, drug addiction, addiction and recovery. And I also want to remind our listeners that this program will also be repeated again on radio and TV Jagriti at 10 p.m. tonight for those of you who are unable to follow it at this time. And to let you all know that the program is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube soon after the completion of the program this morning, and also on Facebook. And I'm hoping that our listeners would use this as a resource to send links to people who they think can benefit from this program. You know, one of the greatest challenges that a lot of relatives, friends, and so on, employers have with the people around them is that, you know, if you have someone who you know has had a problem with alcoholism or drug addiction, the most difficult thing is to speak to them about it, because this is a disease of denial. And it is also very, very difficult, I know, to get them to sit and listen to this program. I've known relatives who have attempted to do that. And sometimes the alcoholic, the active alcoholic or drug addict, shows no interest or avoids listening or paying attention to this. But I know from experience that if you send a link to them or you send literature to them, secretly the alcoholic or drug addict is aware that he's having a problem, but is not ready or willing to admit to it to anyone significant to them or people around them, but they will secretly look at it. So I have been posting these programs on YouTube under my name, Ramnaresh Dwarika, and the caption Addiction and Recovery. And there are many, many programs there that one can go into. I know a lot of people have been going into it, listening to it. Students have been going to it and learning. There you have programs that can help you to identify whether you're an alcoholic or not, or a drug addict. There are programs about where the resources are available in Trinidad and Tobago and worldwide. There's also a lot of information on understanding the nature of alcoholism and drug addiction. There's information about how you can self-diagnose whether you have a problem. There's the 12 questions there that is used in Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's a wealth of information that has been um, given over the program in the last few months. And I'm suggesting to listeners, you know, if you know someone who can benefit from this information, you can send them the link or you can give them my number. I'm open. They can call, and I will be only too willing to respond to their calls. As you see on your screen, there is also a number that one can text if you wish to. If you have WhatsApp, you can text 768-5925 with any questions or comments you have in your mind, and I will respond and entertain them on the program. And I also will let people in recovery know that you can call and give brief comments as well as to what your experience has been. And this morning, I want to say a special thank you to a regular listener to the program, Dalton, all the way from Maruga, who has sent in 3 questions. Very, very important questions. I will deal with each one at a time. And I want to encourage our listeners. There's 2 numbers there, 663 2335-663-1027. You can call. This is an interactive program. You can call and ask any question and we will respond to it. I will respond to the best of my ability. So the first question that Dalton sent in was, is alcoholism a disease of the mind or of the physical body? A very, very important question. And the fact is that now we have been able to establish that alcoholism is a disease. For the longest while, there was a lot of, and there still is in some parts of the world, they still debate this, whether alcoholism and drug addiction is a bona fide disease or is it just a bad habit? Is it a moral issue? Is it because of weak will and or just see social deviance? But the DSM, the latest diagnostic statistical manual that is issued by the World Health Authority on this subject has now accepted, and for quite a while, accepted that alcoholism and addiction is a disease. And as a result, that has sort of taken off the stigma associated with alcoholism and drug addiction to the extent where companies now, entire governments and so on have recognized alcoholism is a disease, drug addiction is a disease, so that workers don't get fired because they suffer with a disease. That has been a standard industrial relations practice. You can't fire somebody for being sick. You understand? However, since they recognized it, government departments and even in Trinidad, I know several government departments and private companies as well have now been sending their workers who are so afflicted for treatment for their disease. Of course, if you continue to relapse and you can't seem to be able to come off the addiction, then of course, if you're in government, you're medically boarded, as we say. You are retired with your full pension at the time, being medically unfit to continue to work. But coming back directly to the question, whether it is a disease of the mind, yes, it is a disease of the mind. It is also a disease of the body, but it is also a disease of the spirit. Human beings, we are biopsychosocial spiritual beings. And bio means we have bones and muscles and organs. Psycho means that we have a mind and we have feelings and emotions. Socio means that we belong to relationships. Being in a family, you may be a father, a brother, a son. You belong to relationships on the job as well, as a co-worker or as an employee. And then we also are spiritual beings. All, whether we are atheist or agnostic, we have some idea of our existence. And for most people in the world, they believe in some form of a higher power. So that unlike other diseases, this is the only disease that affects all four areas. And this has implications for recovery. It is important that we understand this because if in the past and even now, most people suffering with alcoholism and drug addiction will show up at their doctor, the primary care physician, or their psychiatrist presenting with physical symptoms. That is, they can't sleep, they can't eat, they are nervous, they become depressed, they become anxious. But all of these things are really withdrawal symptoms associated with the disease, with the use of the drug. And if you stop using the drug with time, all of these will clear up. So that most people present at their doctor and because alcohol is a sedative, for instance, when you stop using it, you'll start having insomnia. You'll have difficulty to sleep. So you go to the doctor and you tell him, well, look, you know, I have not been able to sleep. And the doctor is aware. If once he hears your history, realize you've been dependent on alcohol, which is a sedative, which is just like sleeping pills. When you stop taking, your body needs that in order to sleep. So he gives you a sedative. right? There are many, many kinds of sedatives. I am trying to avoid saying the name because I don't want people to go buying sedatives, because I know that there are drugstores that are unscrupulous and who are willing to sell this under the counter. However, the fact of the matter now, that creates a bigger problem, because when you come off the alcohol, you start buying the sleeping pills, you start becoming dependent on the sleeping pills. And after, in the beginning, 5 milligrams will put you to sleep. But after a little while, you'll develop what is called tolerance. And you'll find that 5 milligram is no longer doing the work, so you have to take 10, and then 15, and God knows, you reach to a point, at some point, where whatever amount you're taking is not putting you to sleep because you have now become tolerant of it. And a lot of people who were drinking at first and would have become dependent on alcohol to help, not only help them to sleep, but to cope with other life's problems, to deal with depression, starts using alcohol in conjunction with the sleeping pills. And now you have a double whammy here. You have a more serious problem that can become fatal. So that when it is, I'll tell you from my experience, it is several times more easy to come off the illicit drugs and the alcohol than it is to come off prescription medication. I have been seeing it daily in my practice here, where a lot of people are showing up, especially people in the upper and middle class, children, young people at university showing up here with a double addiction. They were suffering with depression or insomnia or anxiety that might be related to their schoolwork, their stress level at university, or uh, as a result of some relationship problems, being jilted and so on. And they were already introduced to alcohol, started, go to the psychiatrist, now being put on psychotropic drugs, and gone back to using both of them in combination and find it extremely difficult to come off that. Now, last week I did a program on acupuncture, which I've been using successfully to help with all the withdrawal symptoms, so that a person who is um, well intended, who has good insight and motivation for recovery, can benefit from acupuncture in conjunction with counseling and psychotherapy. So coming back to the question, it is not only a physical disease, it not alcohol, and in particular affects from the tip of your lip to the other end. Everything it comes in contact with, directly and indirectly. It is not only, although it don't directly go to your brain, it affects your brain. It affects all your organs, and with time, your body becomes dependent on it to function. So that the person who has been using alcohol for a long time, when he tries to stop, he has the shakes, he becomes depressed, he becomes irritable, he becomes anxious, and these are all classic withdrawal symptoms. And then of course, he's unable to sleep. So it not only affects the physical body, but it affects the mind, because a lot of people who would have started using alcohol, in fact, me in particular, I can remember in my case, having to ask to sing a song in public, and I never felt adequate, always felt afraid, that I'd make a fool of myself. And I found that when I take a drink, it will bolster my courage. So a lot of people use it to help to stabilize the mind, to support the courage, to relieve inhibitions and so on, and eventually become dependent on it. So that if, a lot of performers, I know a lot of singers in the past, if they don't take a few drinks, they tell you, I can't sing. You understand? And we've seen the performing arts as well. So that it has a profound effect on the mind. It's a disease of the mind as well, because it leads to a feeling of inadequacy, that I can't perform well, I will not be able to do well unless I take a drink. And then, of course, it is a disease of the relationships, because it goes without saying how many a parent has not been able to go to sleep until the son comes home. You know, he's out there. You're always, there's so much anxiety, whether the next horn blow is the police are coming to say he got locked up or he got in a fatal accident. Or, you know, a lot of users, alcoholics and drug addicts, they don't really consider how much their behavior is affecting the people around them. When you look at the parents, if the father, who's the income earner, is drinking, using out all the money to support his habit, his drug, especially if it is cocaine or one of those that can literally eat up all your money in minutes. And then the children has to go to school without the books, the fees can't be paid, they don't have money to pay the van to take them to school, they don't have groceries, they don't have new clothing to go to any family functions and all of that. So it is also a disease of the relationships. And some will argue that, look, this is really a spiritual malady. In fact, if you ever went to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, you'd hear almost every AA member say that they are sober today, but for the grace of God. And if you tax them on that, they'll explain it to you because they would have tried every single method known to them. They would have gone to the doctor, the psychiatrist, the obeah, the pundit, everybody in an effort to stop their drinking or drug use. They would have changed the blend, changed the geography, changed the friends, you name it, every strategy they know they would have tried, their will and all of that, making all kind of resolutions. You remember those from New Year resolutions and birthday resolutions that I will stop the drinking. I remember all of those. And to no avail. But it was only until they asked God to help them to remove this obsession. A lot of people will tell you, and I personally believe that this is really a war between God and the devil. And alcohol and drugs are devices that the devil uses to enslave the human mind. And we live in that negativity. And it is only God and an act of providence that can remove that obsession. Because for people who don't know, when the alcoholic is not actively using, like when he's sober during the day, his mind is obsessed. His mind is most of the time thinking when I'm going to finish here, where I'm going to get my next drink, where I'm next going to get my next drug. So that obsession, a lot of people who are unaware will say, boy, it's just your mind. You just have to make up your mind. Well, that is easy to say. For the alcoholic or the drug addict who has become dependent on alcohol and drugs, he has no mind of his own anymore. And it is only an act of providence that can really help him to remove that obsession. So that in response to that first question, whether it is a disease of the mind or the body, in fact, I would add, it's not only a disease of the mind and the body, it's a disease of the relationship, the emotions, and the spirit of the person as well. So that I hope that answers. And anyone listening, of course, you can chime in and add your 2 cents if you wish. And so there's another question from Dalton. If alcoholism is defined as a compulsion to get inhabited for no reason, how you think a person who drinks or fight or cover depression or other issues should be described? Well, if I understand your question, Dalton, yes, the fact is it's a chicken and egg sort of situation, whether the depression came first and the person were using drugs or alcohol to help them to cope, as a lot of people believe when they go to the psychiatrist, are presenting with symptoms of anxiety and depression. And like I mentioned before, would start using psychotropic drugs to help them to cope with that, but then find that they could also supplement that with alcohol and other drugs because they're all mind altering substances. And it is common that a lot of people who eventually become addicted and dependent on drug, they are what we describe in recovery circles as self-medicating. And that is important for practitioners and the helping professions and relatives to understand, because it is like any other medicine that a person is depending on now in order to be normal, to survive. And if you are suggesting that you take it is like a person who suffered a broken leg and started to walk around with crutches. Now, when they have become so dependent on these crutches that the few times they try to walk without it, they fell. So they now have come to learn and accept that, look, I can't walk without this. So another person, not knowing that, will suggest to them, man, try and walk without your crutches. It don't look good walking with crutches. Besides, it making you can't walk with that. But the person is unaware of the trauma that the person has gone through and that has led to the dependence. So that if you are going to take away somebody's crutches or whatever they're depending on to self-medicate, you better have something else that you can offer them. And they have to actually understand what is it you're offering to them, that they will be willing to make that change. And this is where places like Alcoholics Anonymous and support groups are very, very effective, because you go to a group where a lot of people there will tell you, look, I too were walking on crutches. I too thought I could not walk without it. I too had suffered depression. I was self-medicating. I suffered with anxiety. And some even will tell you that they were hallucinating when they were trying to stop using the drug. But they will also explain to you, the person listening, how they were able to come off. And today they are completely drug free. And so that the group, the same way a group can encourage a person to drink, a group can also help a person to stay sober. So that, yes, going to the doctor, taking medication for depression and anxiety could be a short-term measure, but one has to be especially careful that you don't become dependent on these. And I'm not blaming the doctors. I worked in psychiatry at Ward 8 and St. Anne's, at Cora, Ward 1 in San Fernando, and I worked with some very eminent and very, very hardworking psychiatrists and doctors there, very well intentioned as well. But I also know from the culture of this society that a lot of people don't always follow the instructions. And the doctor said, look, you're only going to use this medication for a week, but you'll have to come off it because you can become dependent on it. And they work out with you a strategy, how you need to wean yourself off it and all of that. And I want to add in here that this is one of the reasons, personally, I introduced the use of acupuncture in treating drug addiction, because unlike the prescription pills that have a high potency to create dependence, acupuncture does not. You cannot become dependent or addicted to acupuncture. So that what it does, it doesn't give you a high, but if you are depressed, it brings you up. It brings you into balance, into what is called stasis. So that if you have a strong resolve, determination to stop using drug, and I must say that that strong resolve and determination comes from insight, understanding the true role that alcohol has played and drug has played in your life. And that is the responsibility of the counselor, to help the person to realize, look, it is not the family that is causing you to use the drugs, or the friends, or the juta glass that you drank from that got you drunk. The counselor is supposed to help you to understand the relationship between where you have found yourself and the relationship with the drug. And it is what we call consequential thinking. You develop consequential thinking to realize, look, it is the rum that is causing the trouble. It is the marijuana and cocaine that caused me to get into trouble. It wasn't because my parents didn't give me the inheritance or treated me differently. And alcoholics and drug addicts like to blame everybody else. Their wife who gave them stress, and sometimes the family as well, without realizing it, they also tend to blame other people for their children's drug use. I've heard, one mother telling me at Cora, he was a good boy. But when he was small, he fell from a tree and hit his head. This is why he don't think straight, and that's why he's using drugs. Because of course, mothers who don't want to. I'm not blaming any mother here. You don't make a child who's a drug addict. You understand? It is not your fault. And I know some mothers believe it is their fault because the drug addict will want to make them think so. And yes, addicts and alcoholics are very good at rationalizing, you know, blaming everybody else to the extent, well, yes, they will say, but Mr. Dwarika say, I was born with this disease because it is genetic, so it's not my fault. And that is true. Some people are born alcoholics. It is not their fault. And some people, and that leads me straight into the third question, can a person become an alcoholic from constant drinking even if he was not genetically predisposed? Very good question. So there are people who are genetically predisposed. Science has actually isolated the gene that predisposes a person to alcoholism or drug addiction, which has serious implications for our listeners out there. If you have a father or mother, grandfather or grandmother, great grandfather or great grandmother who are alcoholic or drug addict, it is possible that you could have inherited that genetic predisposition to alcoholism or drug addiction. Because the same way we inherit, our looks, our complexion, our ethnicity from our ancestors, and some people will say, you have your grandfather nose, or you have your great grandfather's height, or things like that. The same way we inherit those qualities from our ancestors, so too we could inherit that genetic predisposition that predisposes us to alcoholism and drug addiction. Now, some of us may not go into full-blown alcoholism or drug addiction because we have a mindset that keeps us in check. But generally, people who have that genetic predisposition, the first day they go to drink, they tend to drink until they get drunk because they already have it built in there. But a lot of people, in answer to the question of Mr. Dalton's question, is a lot of people who would have taken drink recreationally as a young man. You go to a party and you get a drink, or at Christmas, like my grandmother gave me a drink of cherry brandy. I was just about 7. I never forgot that. So we get that first little experience, with alcohol or drugs, and we feel the mood change and all of that, and we remember it is embedded in our memories. So we use it recreationally for a little while, and because we still have strong parental supervision, we still have a lot of respect for the mores and the rules of the family and so on, the societal rules. We manage to stay clean and manageable. Our life is still manageable. Our body is young and still able to metabolize the alcohol very efficiently. So we're strong. We don't fall down all about the place. And then a lot of times we don't have the money to really support the habit and buy the alcohol is not readily available to us as later on in life. But later on will come. We will get a job and we will have freedom now from parental control and from a schoolboy's allowance. Now we have a full man's salary, like happened with me. And we were able now to afford to drink, and gradually from recreational drinking and so on, it goes to habitual drinking without realizing it. There, like I can, in my own life, I was still able to manage, go to work, and I'll drink on weekends and with friends and so on. But even I didn't realize, first it was occasional drinking for Christmas only. And then maybe I'll take a drink at some wedding or something. But then when I started to work, month end I'll take a drink. with the staff. I sit with the, with the magistrate and the JP and so on, working in the courthouse. And we'll order food and we'll have a little drink. But even now in reflection, I realize the magistrate, the JP, and most of the senior people and so on would leave. But there are a few of us who would remain there. And of course, we'll joke around ourselves that, they have their wife, they're afraid their wife and all kind of thing. That's why they have to leave. But we were young, most of us unmarried without responsibility. And we had license to drink. As we said in those days, we could paint the city red. But now I realize most of us who stayed back were people who were budding alcoholics, who already, some of us had the genetic predisposition, and some were starting to develop a tolerance and a dependence. So we were drinking more and drinking more often to get that feeling. So that, yes, direct answer to the question, a person can you can be born an alcoholic, and by drinking, you can develop tolerance and become an alcoholic, where you become dependent on alcohol now because you start using alcohol to boost your confidence. You start using alcohol to help you feel adequate. Start using alcohol to deal with your depression. You start using alcohol to deal with your anxiety. You start if you have a a quarrel with a neighbor, you feel you have to take a drink before you could respond to that, you know? So, so that, yes, in a direct answer, you can be born an alcoholic, and by using it, you can become an alcoholic as well, because you could develop tolerance and you can develop dependence. And the strange thing about this is that you never know when you cross that imaginary borderline from social drinking to compulsive drinking, to dependence, psychological dependence, you know. And because of the stigma associated with alcoholism and drug addiction, most people are in denial. They will deny right up to the last that no, I don't have a problem with alcohol. And even their family will defend them. I have seen that, I've been there, where family members say, no, he just takes a drink. I don't see any problem with him taking a drink, he don't drink every day. And that leads to a misunderstanding, because a lot of people think that an alcoholic is the vagrant who is sleeping under the shop, the fellow who is on the pavement, who is homeless. He's a drug addict, he's an alcoholic. Not me. I have two cars in the garage. I have a good job. I have money in the bank. I have a wife and I have children who are well placed in society. I can't be an alcoholic. No. I am not like them. Well, let me respond to that. Being an alcoholic or a drug addict does not depend on how much drug you use or how much alcohol you use or even how often you use it. No, it does not even depend on where you are placed in society, whether you have two cars in the garage, you have a big job, or you have money in the bank, or whether you are a poor person and yeah, is homeless. That doesn't necessarily make you an alcoholic. No. What makes you an alcoholic is simply this. A person who is not an alcoholic can take one drink, two drink, and put down the glass, even pour a third, and maybe even leave it. You understand? And go about their business. And an alcoholic might be a person who may not be, he may be bone dry for years. He might realize the drinking is causing a problem in his life. And there's an example in one of the big book, what is called the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, of a man who realized alcohol was causing a lot of problems in his life and decided by bare sheer will, bad mind as we say, he stopped drinking for 25 years. And he became very successful as a businessman. He had everything money could afford now that he wanted and so on. And then he retired. after 25 years. And at the age of 50 something, he retired. And out came the bedroom slippers and the overcoat and he pulled out and a bottle of scotch and the glasses. He said, well, now I have achieved all that I wanted to, and I could take a drink. And realized once you take the first one, it starts a craving for more. The disease that was alcoholism, although it was 25 years after, had not subsided. It's as though it still progressed in the background. Now, when he started to drink, he never drank like a person who was taking a drink for the very first time. He just drank, and in a short while started to have worse symptoms than he ever had before. And he tried every single willpower and strategy that he had to realize that he couldn't stop. He was in and out of treatment and all of that. And within 4 years of retiring, he died. He deteriorated and he died. So that the point is that it doesn't matter how long you stay away. That doesn't determine whether you have recovered. And that's another word that has been bandied about. A lot of people are saying that, they have recovered from alcoholism. Well, if you ever make the mistake thinking you have recovered, that you could go back and drink, all hell will break loose. Your disease continues in the background even though you have stopped. So that, straight to the point, what determines whether you are a social drinker or and differentiates you from an alcoholic is the fact that a social drinker can take 1, 2, 3 drinks, go about his business, and it will never cause a problem in his life. Once he realizes it is causing a problem, he's able to stop. The alcoholic, on the other hand, may not drink for months or years, but once he takes that first drink, he has a craving. He develops a craving for another drink. And that is the gold standard, as we say, the hallmark of an alcoholic. Once you take that first drink and you have a craving for another, you are an alcoholic, I'm sorry to say. You might be an alcoholic in the beginning stage, still have your motor car and your job and your family, or you may be an alcoholic in the middle stage, struggling along and managing still somehow, or you could be an alcoholic in the last stage, where now you're on the pavement, you've lost everything, you're having delirium tremens, you're having blackouts. That is, you're drinking and can't remember the next day where you were, what happened. People are saying, look, you came home last night and broke up the furniture. But you say, no, I never did that. Or you said this and you said that and you can't remember. Those are all signs of chronic alcoholism. Or you are seeing and hearing voices talking to you when there's nobody there, seeing people coming to harm you and hurt you and so on. Those are what you call auditory or visual hallucination. Then there are people who they feel like what we call fowlers, crablows climbing on their skin. Those are called tactile hallucinations. That once a person start having those things, you know that they are in a chronic state of alcoholism. But once you take one drink and you have a craving for another, you're an alcoholic. The rest is just to put you in, decide which stage, whether you're in the beginning stage, middle stage, or chronic stage. Just like any other illness, if you catch it in the beginning stage, then you can save yourself 10 to 15 years of literal hell and misery. And for those of you listening to this program, if you have ancestors who were alcoholics or drug addicts, please know that you could have inherited the genes, and so that you have to be especially careful around alcohol and drugs. So that if in your own experience you realize, or the next time you go and take one drink, and you realize that, look, you're having a craving for another, then you are confirming that you are on the road to alcoholism. You might still be managing your life, having everything. There are some people who can do that, even though with a drink and drug, but eventually it's going to take its toll. And let me say this in conclusion, there are only 3 places that alcohol and drugs can take you, right? One is it can take you into prison. A lot of people don't want to go to prison. Then it can take you into the mental hospital eventually, especially marijuana. A lot of people, in spite of the thing, because they have decriminalized marijuana now, it is okay. But you will see an increase in the population at St. Anne's of young people going in there with what is called drug-induced psychosis. And finally, it will take you to the cemetery. Now, these are three places that I don't think any sane, ambitious young person, human being, would want to accelerate the process to go there. You're not hurried to go any of those places, prison, insanity, or death. So that a word to the wise is sufficient. If you think you might be having a problem with alcohol or drugs, there are numbers you can call. 671-3040 is my number. I have another number, 768-5925. You can text me messages there and I will respond to it. I want to thank the staff at Radio and TV Jagriti and the administration for allowing us this free airtime on both radio and television to speak to all of you out there and to share this information with you. I also want to thank Francis at the station and the other people in the background there who are sourcing these videos. There was a very, very important video at the lead up to this program on cultivating healthy habits. The same way we can cultivate bad habits, we can cultivate good habits. So that if you get addicted to going to AA meetings, that I would say that is a good habit. If you get addicted to listening to good songs, tuning into a station like this, if you have become dependent, these are good habits, which I would recommend. And of course, I want to say thank you again to all the people who have the people who send in the questions. I know I'm not able to answer all of them, but keep sending your questions, and I will do my best to respond to them to the best of my ability. And thank you all again for listening. And remember, this program is every Thursday from 9 a.m. And if you have questions, of course, you can call 671-3040. So thank you and bye for now.